Suffering Podcast.
Danger is all around us at all times. Evil is lurking in the shadows and ever present, even though it is not visible to the naked eye. We live in blissful ignorance, but the darkness is always within arm's reach. So what keeps the darkness from overtaking us when we are the least prepared and the most vulnerable? Just as evil is ever present, so is a light that surrounds us and protects our every move, guiding us into the direction that we are supposed to walk. The difficulty comes when we don't heed that internal warning, that feeling deep in our stomach that tells us right from wrong. We know the right thing to do, but often we ignore our guardian angel. I'm Kevin Donaldson, always here with Mike Falaise, and welcome to the Suffering Podcast. If you're a fan of overcoming adversity and overcoming suffering, then we're for you, because that's what we do here, and that's the stories that we highlight. So do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, please comment, ring the bell so you can get notified of all of our new content, and now you can join. And of course, follow us on all social media so you can find out what we're up to when we're up to it. I love having return guests, and now we got a new guest. But this one, so your stories intertwine, and tonight we have Jen May and Keith Shibley. Keith Shibley's back in the studio, and we're going to talk about the suffering of a guardian angel. Your stories intertwine, and the information that we're going to get out on this episode, I think, is so valuable to somebody who actually trusts their boss. But thank you both for taking this long ride and coming up all the way from Marlboro Town, Virginia. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for having us.
Before we get into anything, now Jen says I cannot offend her. We're going to do our best to test that theory. Before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody as police, and we certainly don't trust anybody as podcasters, but we do trust the guys over at Toyota Hackensack. So if you're looking for a car, go to toyotahackensack.com and make sure you tell them the Suffering Podcast sent you. So, Jen, you're new to the show. Keith, you've been here before. We take a question from our audience each week. This question comes from Power 3000. And I think it's an appropriate one because we have all spent our lives in law enforcement, and sometimes the job can consume us. So, how do you balance life and work? Jen, you're our new guest. I want to go to you first.
I've often been in the situation where folks looked at me for 23 years and said, Jen, how are you doing it? How are you balancing life, work, being a mom, being a wife, and putting it all together? And I got to be honest with you, there is a difficulty in balancing if you don't pay attention to yourself, at least for a few minutes in a day. And one of the things that I told everybody is find 30 minutes in your 24-hour day for you. And so one of the things that I started doing was taking 30 minutes a day, even if I have to split it up between 10, 10, and 10, 5, 5, and 5. I'd work out. I'd go for a walk. I love my Peloton. And those are the moments that I would just take to retreat, get a reset of what was ahead of me, and try and figure out what I needed to do on a daily basis. By no means was it easy. And
now, what I do know is you have all these different things in your life. Something has to be sacrificed. And I'm interested here, to do all that stuff, to get that 30 minutes that you're talking about, something has to be sacrificed. What would that be?
Depends on the day. It depends on what was in front of me. There were command post times where it was 24 hours, and the sacrifice, my family didn't see me in that time frame. The days where I was racing home at 1 a.m. to finish Christmas present wrapping, and then we get there, and the kids are up 3 hours later. And that's the sacrifice. It was real. Being on the phone during my nephew's baptism, in and out, because things were going on outside in my career, in my world, that I had to pay attention to. And so where am I? I'm outside while everyone else is inside celebrating. So there's the sacrifice. I mean, that's the truth behind it. Racing.
At the high level of law enforcement with the FBI, it's different than being a street cop where you can take 5 minutes, especially when call volume's low. You're sort of in a different situation.
I was very much in a different situation in the last 3 years when I was an executive. I was a senior executive service member. I would say those were the most difficult years of my career. I would say even before that, whether I was an agent on the street or whether I was an assistant special agent in charge in the field office, it really depended on what was the demand. I'd have to go brief the director for something at National Security Letter for a security matter. And then the next thing you know, I'm on the phone because my daughter is sick at school or my son needed something right away for his education or system. And really trying to balance those times and those meetings were, I mean, it was stressful. It
It's
was.
not an easy transition. You know, you have to go mom to FBI agent. It's hard for all of us to do. And especially probably hard when they modeled Clarice Starling after you. But actually, I know somebody that was in Quantico when she was training.
That's okay. I ran a faster mile.
So, Keith, how do you balance, because you're current, all right, how do you balance work and life?
So a lot differently now than 20 years ago when I started. 20 years ago when I started, everybody says don't take it home. And I think it's pretty impossible not to take that stuff home with you. And not being aware of it, I start treating my kids and family like I treat people on the street.
Probably worse.
Probably. Look, when my kids were fighting, I would talk to them like they were suspects. You know what I mean? You shut up and sit over there. And it was, it got bad. And as the years went on, and I started to learn how to manage it. It's all communication, man. It's if I have a really bad day, the last thing I want to do as soon as I walk in is did this bill get paid? Your son did this. Did you do that homework? So it's just a system now, communication with the wife. It's
Is it the hand?
you know what? Emoji hand sometimes, but it's a quick text. I had a really bad day. When I get home, I need 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and then we'll tackle like the family stuff. And
That's healthy. I think that's a healthy way.
And it's worked out pretty good. But
So I have 4 priorities in my life as it sits today. My 4 priorities are my kids, obviously, my wife, my faith, and the show, right? So that's my 4 priorities. And the faith is actually a relatively new one, so we can sort of kick that one out. There's many times when those 4, and each one is really important to me on different levels, right? So you have to sit there and you prioritize that stuff. I'm going from the minute, and I also have a full-time job, which I really don't care about all that much, but I still have a full-time job. And you have all these things coming at you and you're trying to juggle all these things, but I'm a list maker, right? So if I come to you and you're talking to me, I'm like, hey, dude, it's a list day. And that means leave me be. I write stuff down and it gives me the ability to just get it out of my head. But with those 4 priorities that I have in my life, there are times when I've been really bad at managing those and balancing those. I would put things at the top of the list that shouldn't be at the top of the list. There are times when, especially when I was first starting out this show, where this podcast took over my life and became all consuming to everything that I love dear. And that means my wife and my kids took a back seat. There were times that, when especially this new parents are very guilty of this. Their kids are number one. Their kids are everything to me. There were times, but then you got my wife over here, right? My wife is a priority, but she's not being valued. She's feeling cast aside. She's third banana all of a sudden to a show, to a creation, to another job. And she's also a third banana to a show that was created out of my craziness. As it sits today, okay, here's how I balance my life. I prioritize everything. Number 1, and this is going to sound really weird to a lot of different people, and a lot of people aren't going to agree with me. Number 1 priority for me is my faith, because without my faith, none of the other stuff can fall into place. And second, below that one is my wife. Okay, and it's not that these things aren't important or less important than my faith, but I use my faith in order to love my wife better. Okay, and she has to be the priority above everybody. And third is my kids, and that's where people start to go, it's my kids, they're number 1. No, absolutely not. You have a partner. You have a partner in this relationship that you have, this responsibility that you have, that you need. You cannot be the single executive in this relationship. Single parents do it. They have a very difficult time doing it, and it rarely works out well. There's always something that fell by the wayside, something that was deficient. Kids with 2 parents are always a little bit more well-adjusted. That's just the facts, and the statistics state that. And of course, fourth is this show. I do care about this show. I do. But I also have to remember that this is just a show. It's a lot of stress. And I recently, I was blessed to lead church service this past weekend. And I told this story. And it was a story. I'm going to take credit for it because I already gave credit once. So after I give credit once, it's mine. And I said, I asked the congregation, I said, how much do you think this glass of water weighs? And they're shouting out numbers. And I said, it doesn't matter. Okay, because if I hold this up for a couple seconds, no big deal. If I hold this up for a couple hours, it's going to my arm's going to be stiffed. If I hold this up for a day, my arm's going to be numb and it's going to be paralyzed and I can't even use my arm. When here's the thing, all I had to do was just put it down and the pain's over with. So those things that become overbearing, those things that aren't high on the priority list, well, sometimes you just have to put it down. And you have to remember what your number one is. And that's how I balance life. And I wasn't always good at that. I still am a work in progress. I still work at that every single day. But that's how I balance life. So, Power 3000, thank you for sending that question in. Keep sending in your questions, and we will try to get them on the air. So, Jen, you work with this little Lebanese guy, and he would talk you up as this person that was just, I think, second banana to God. And when Keith and I talk a lot. Like, people don't realize that Keith is one of my dearest friends, and Keith and I talk a lot. And he says, I'd like to try to get Jen on because she made a big impact in my life. I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that this is your first podcast. I'm going to warn you, not all podcasts are like this. Some are better and some are a lot worse. But thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. And I've said to Keith before, I said, I'm not sure what you think I did. That was really so amazing. I just felt like I did what was right. And so I often look at him and say, I'm not extraordinary. Like, I did what I did because it was the right thing to do.
Do you know what the mark of a hero is in classic literature? It's an ordinary person put in extraordinary circumstances and succeeding. Okay? So there is no hero throughout the human history that thinks they are extraordinary. Because the ones who think they're extraordinary, you're not. Yeah. You're not. So you fit right in. So, Jen, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? Where'd you grow up? And how did you grow up?
Born and raised in Queens, New York. I grew up on a very busy street, in fact. I have a mom, and I had a little sister who was 9 years younger than me.
Was she an oops?
She was not an oops. She was...
Planned 9 years apart?
Different dad.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
Different dad. I was almost like a second mom to her because I was 9 years old, and I was helping change her diapers, and that was my little sister. Blech. But she was mine, and by my side. I was always very academically inclined. I loved school. I went to private school. I went to St. Kevin's. I went straight to...
Dude, wait, hold on. Stop. St. Kevin's?
St. Kevin's.
I got to find out where this is, and I got to go visit that because that is the best name I've ever heard.
Isn't that the best name?
Wow.
Get a shirt.
I do.
See, I already had you in mind before you had me on the podcast.
I'm going to show up at that school and go, I'm here.
Yeah. And it was a great school. I loved sports. I was all about sports. I liked track. I ran. I was on softball. So I had a really good, growing up childhood. I ended up going into St. Francis Prep, not the best named school. That was St. Kevin's. But I went to St. Francis Prep in high school. And my goal was to really go away to college. I wanted to go to college and ended up in SUNY Binghamton, upstate New York. I studied philosophy of politics and law. And at some point, I thought, you know what? I'm going to be an attorney. I think being an attorney in law was the direction I was going in.
Do you mind if I ask how old you are? I know it's never appropriate to ask that, but there's a reason for that.
I am going to be 51 this year.
All right, so we are the same age, okay? And the reason I bring that up...
You know you shouldn't ask a woman her age.
I know, but I told you, I'm trying to offend you. The reason I ask that is when we were in school, okay, it was this giant push towards being a lawyer. Like, I took my LSATs, and I did well on my LSATs, but I just didn't want to be a lawyer. Like, it's just not me. I'm not Johnny Cochran. I'm not Robert Shapiro. Like, that's just not me. But there was this huge push with our generation to go to law school. So what happened? Everybody went to law school, and then you had a bunch of lawyers with $200,000 in debt who were making $60,000 to $70,000 being law clerks.
So the reason for me wanting to go to school and then think about being a lawyer actually was a very different reason. My reason for wanting to be a lawyer was because when I was 16, I was held up in my first job by gunpoint. And so that actually triggered my interest in law. And that is what triggered my interest in helping other children who may have been affected by someone who was held up. And so I had that as sort of the drive as opposed to at the time just being a lawyer.
So that particular incident, because and Keith, I know you've dealt with this when you go to a house that's been burglarized or someplace that somebody's personal space that's been violated. Like that's what happened here.
It was actually at where I worked.
No, but your personal
yes.
your personal space was violated, and even your workplace is your own personal space. It's a place where you're supposed to feel safe. And I've watched this with burglaries where you'll have a young kid whose house was just burglarized and they don't want to sleep there, even though there's no chance in the world that they're coming back. Like the guy who pointed a gun at you, there's no shot in the world that he's coming back anytime soon. You know, that just doesn't happen. So on paper, you're safe, right? You're as safe as you've ever been.
Yes.
But in your head, you're like, it's going to happen like tomorrow, right?
Well, interestingly enough, it had happened at the same place. It was Tom McCann. I worked at Tom McCann. I was 16.
Who robs a shoe store?
Well, when there's only women that are working there, it happened to be someone who was robbing local stores that predominantly had women running it. And so it had been robbed about 6 months prior and happened to a friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
And so I never actually wanted to work there, but who thought it was going to ever happen again? So I did. I ended up taking a job there thinking it was safe. And lo and behold, I was part of that robbery on that day.
Going out of that incident, what are some of the aftershocks that you felt? And you said you were 16?
16. One of them was not being able to sleep at all. And believe it or not, the friend who was also held up, she and I would stay on the phone. And back then we had those long spiral phones. We didn't have cell phones like today. You couldn't FaceTime. And we had such a difficult time sleeping that we would actually call each other at night, talk to each other, and then fall asleep together because that's how we felt safe.
That's actually kind of cool. You know, like there are things that Keith and I bond over because we've been through the same trauma, right?
Yes.
And you and your friend were through the same trauma. It was a gift, okay? What happened to you wasn't a gift, but having somebody to lean on, because if that was just you, you were like, well, nobody can understand what's going on in my head. So that's actually looking back that far, you know, do you see that as a gift?
100%. We had each other. We could at least understand what we both went through and empathize with each other. Even on Facebook today, I still see her and her beautiful family. So for me, we did okay. Even despite what had happened, we both did really well. And
see, now your job is to bring her in here and both of you sit in here. We get rid of this guy. And,
He's stuck with me, though.
I know. He's stuck with me, too. So you're stuck. Sorry, buddy. So you move on. You go to college. You go to SUNY.
Mm-hmm.
Did your mindset change with the law?
It did. At that point, I had decided I had a lot of school loans and debt. I didn't want to go to law school right away. I thought, let me go out in the real world. I'll work. And I got my first job. I worked at Nature Publishing. I got my first job. I think it was $23,000 a year at the time. And I thought, oh, man, this is great. And it
Late
was
90s?
It was 96.
96, okay.
96.
But you know what? Starting off, first job, our generation wasn't afraid to take those lower paying jobs. You're like, okay, this $23,000, it's more than I had yesterday.
It was exactly more than I had yesterday. And so I started working there. It was a little marketing position, entry level. One of the women that actually worked there thought very highly of me. And as I worked in the marketing field, she said, you know what, Jen, don't go to law school. You might consider getting a master's degree in marketing. It'll help you in your career, going corporate. And that is really what started to change my mind. And I started going to school at night and getting my master's degree.
It's very smart because the way I did it was completely the opposite. I stayed in school, got my postgraduate degrees, started teaching high school, which is what I thought I wanted to do, and realized I hated it. Now I'm stuck with all this debt and I don't want to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, no, I didn't want any more debt than I already had. What was nice about doing the night and doing the MBA is that I was working at the time, and from whatever commission I would make in sales or the marketing, I was able to pay off classes by classes.
Wow.
And then paid off my books. So when I finished my master's 3 years later, I did not have any debt from that. I still had my college loans, but I did not have any debt from my master's degree.
Because people don't realize that master's credits are expensive.
They were so expensive.
They were expensive. They're a hell of a lot more expensive than graduate or the regular college credits. Are you ready to enhance your skills and provide the best care to those who need it the most? I'm Kevin Donaldson.
I'm Sherry Alsop. Our trauma-informed training is here to help, and we've been traveling across the country delivering this essential need to departments and organizations of every size, shape, and makeup.
We come to you with on-site training so you don't have to worry about travel or scheduling conflicts.
This isn't just a class, it's an interactive experience. You'll learn directly from subject matter experts who teach from a victim's point of view, putting you in the shoes of those who have experienced trauma.
This approach allows you to understand trauma on a deeper level and to better serve the individuals you work with.
We'll guide you through new interview techniques that prioritize a victim-centered approach, ensuring safety and empathy in every conversation.
And for those of you in law enforcement or other fields, our training includes post-credits, giving you the extra added value and recognition for your commitment to professional growth.
We offer references upon request to show just how effective our training can be.
Don't miss the opportunity to improve your understanding of trauma and make a real difference in the lives of those you serve. Get in touch with us today by going to sherryalsop.com and let us bring trauma-informed training to your organization.
Together, we can make a lasting impact.
You go back, you get your MBA, now you figure, okay, I got something substantial here. I'm going to conquer the world.
I was going to conquer the world, right? I was in my 20s. I was going to conquer the world. And I remember thinking, and at the time, you do go from job to job. You know, every 2 years, I kind of went to the next job and the next job. That's corporate America. But what I was finding is a lack of purpose, a lack of mission. It was very money-oriented, and that just wasn't me. People that I worked next to in the cubicles, I'd ask them how was your weekend? And I remember one person saying, oh, I got high this weekend and I was so drunk. That's not me. And I looked around, I'm like, I am not where I'm supposed to be. And so that's when I started searching myself, well, what do I want to do? And where do I find myself again?
You're looking for a career, not a job.
I wanted a purpose. I wanted to initially be an attorney to help children. So what went wrong? And so I started thinking law, right? Because that's where I had started my dream. And then I went from, I don't want to be an attorney, but I do like law. And then I thought, what did I like to do as a child? And as a child, I liked all of those highlight magazines. I asked a million questions. My father used to tell me, he goes, Jennifer, I can't get through anything without you. Because I'd say, Dad, did you see that car? And he'd go, yeah. I'm like, well, what color was it? Green. Well, how fast was it going? So I never stopped asking questions. So then I thought, maybe law enforcement. And if I was going to do law enforcement, in my mind at the time, federal, I'm gonna do the FBI. I'm gonna do the best law enforcement agency in the world. And so that's where it began. And then I went to the website and I saw a picture. And that picture had, various people on it. And one of them looked like me. And when you see yourself in a picture, you can connect. And so I connected. And I was like, well, that looks like me. So then I applied. And then the rest is really a bit of history.
You applied and you got in. I mean,
I applied, and then I took that first test. And I thought I failed. And I said, there's no way I passed that. I even called my father, and I said, Dad, I didn't fill in all the bubbles. I definitely failed it. He's like, Jennifer, you never failed a test in your life. I'm like, no, Dad, I failed this one. And then I didn't fail. And then I had an applicant coordinator who told me, you're kind of young. You're only 26 years old. The average FBI agent is 32. So you're competing with people that have 6 more years of experience than you. And my response to her at the time is, well, isn't the beauty of an average is that you need a lower number? I said, I'm just giving them the lower number. And then she said, I want you to write a letter why you want to be an FBI agent. And then I did.
You still have that letter?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. In fact, I started that letter on the number 7 train out of Manhattan into Queens. I still have it. It's in pencil. And then I went home and typed it up on a word processor.
Now, apparently, the letter must have been somewhat persuasive because what?
At the time, she said to me, I'm going to take this letter and I'm going to send it to headquarters. I didn't know what any of that meant at the time. And she said, we'll see if you even get a phase 2 interview. And not too long after that, I ended up with a phase 2 interview.
And when did you finally land that plane?
So it was right after 9/11. So I came in December 30th, 2001.
Wow. Yeah, they were you hit the mark on a good time on that one. They needed people like you.
Yes. And at the time, I was single, no children. I was looking to go anywhere else in the country. I wanted to leave New York. I didn't want to, beforehand, I wanted to do something different with my life and just kind of explore and see what was out there.
You must have crushed it at your high school reunion. It's like, well, I'm a housewife, I'm a hairdresser, I'm an FBI agent.
I almost couldn't believe it was true, except when I did graduate, my father said to me at the time, and he was looking, he goes, you're on that stage, and I watched 50 agents getting their picture taken, because at the end of the graduation, you got to get that picture taken on stage. And he goes, I finally realized that you are, in fact, with the people you're supposed to be with. I go, Dad, why are you saying that? And he turned around and he goes, because they're all 50 of you tapping your feet at the same time, very impatient. So he goes, I know that you're where you need to be. And it was so true. Like, I truly found like type A personalities.
So, but getting that job in the FBI, you have something in your head of what you think an FBI agent is. Do they prepare you for that in Quantico?
I think you get the training that you need in Quantico, but I think the true training comes in the field.
So what was your first assignment well, first of all, let's go to Quantico. Did you go through the shooting course in the rain? Because I saw this movie where a woman did that. I just want to make sure. Because that's how all FBI agents qualify with their sidearm.
Oh, no, we did not go through the rain, although there were some pretty cold nights, because at the time it was December 30th again, and then we were there through February, so it was freezing. So trying to put bullets in your weapon and everything, and it's 20 degrees, that seemed to be more difficulty. Not a lot of rain, maybe a little bit of snow and cold.
Now, you have probably one of the firmest handshakes I've ever felt on a woman in my life. I'm assuming you didn't have any problem with the trigger pull, because I don't know what it is about this generation. Every woman who's a smaller stature, you're smaller stature, and that's not a knock. Please understand that. They seem to have a problem with trigger pull. I don't think you had that problem.
No, I had no trouble with the trigger pull, but believe it or not, I had ups and downs with my shooting. In fact, that was the biggest struggle for me at the academy. I had never shot a weapon before, had no association with it. And at the end of the day, that really wasn't up and down to the point where I did not qualify out of the gate the first time. And I had to be what they call as recycled. And so I spent a week and a half with one-on-one training with one of the best instructors there at the academy. And he said to me, he goes, we're going to make this right. He goes, I'm going to have you shooting like Annie Oakley by the end of this. And he, on the very last day of our time when he was working with me, put up a target. And at Quantico, there's a rubber band. And he goes, okay, now we're going to stand at the 15-yard line, and you are going to shoot the rubber band. And I said, what if I don't shoot the rubber band? I mean, we're 15 yards out. And he looked at me and he says, we're going to stay here until you do. And so I ended up shooting that rubber band. And I think that was a moment in time where my confidence went through the roof. Like, at that point, I'm ready.
So that would have been much different in the police academy, because they would have just yelled at you until you either got it right or you got kicked out.
Well, I had some strong opinions from people when I was struggling the first time around. That's why it was good for him to be that person helping me out.
So I have met several FBI agents, and they all seem to have a background not so much in law enforcement. Like they just come from all different walks of life. Like people who become cops, Keith, you got to chime in on this. People become cops. There's two types of people. There's one that is just a job and an opportunity pops up. And then there's your lifelong people who that's their pursuit since they were a little kid. Okay, but what I see in FBI agents is just all walks of life. Accountants, forensic psychologists, all law people, lawyers, all these different people coming in there that law enforcement is not even on their radar. Did you find most of your classmates like that?
It was a combination. I mean, we had a combination of prior law enforcement. However, there were other folks that worked as nurses, or someone that was an accountant. Generally speaking, it was accountants, lawyers, some law enforcement in the background. We had a nurse. We had someone else who was I was marketing and sales. So a little bit of everybody. And what I often tell people is that do well with the things that drive and make you happy in whatever career. Because young people ask me today, well, what do I need to do to be an FBI agent? I said, do what you love. Do what makes you feel happy and do it well.
Too many people today chase the money. Okay, they chase the money. We're very, especially on the East Coast, we're very financially driven. It doesn't matter whether you make $1 million a year or whether you make $20,000 a year. If you're unhappy making $1 million a year, you're still going to be unhappy, and that's just going to resonate down throughout the rest of your life.
If I stayed in private sector, I without a doubt would have made a ton of money. I had a master's degree. I was going in that direction. I had it in marketing. If I had stayed in Manhattan and pursued that career, I would have made a lot more money. But as I had said earlier, I wasn't happy. There's nothing in it that was fulfilling me at the time. And so for me, service, commitment to our country, people, caring for people, and finding a group of people that had similar and commonalities like I did in health, in service. That's what I ultimately ended up finding.
But you're also at the top level, the highest echelon of law enforcement. You're not like an airport cop or something like that, like
this.
Those guys are like the bottom of the barrel.
I've seen that movie.
That was good. That was good.
No, but you're at the top. So there's a certain amount of pride in that.
I got to be honest with you. I never saw or felt that way. I just felt like I was in a place doing really good things and with a mission and a purpose. And it was bigger than I was. And I didn't even think about whether or not we were upper echelon, except when I did say, well, if I'm going to go into law enforcement, I'm going into the best. And obviously my perception of the best was the FBI and still is.
If we tell people we're cops, oh, great, you're part of the 700,000 of them in the country. If you say you're an FBI agent, yes, you're part of a very, very select few.
Yes.
So what was your first post out of Quantico?
New York. I actually went on white collar crime. It was securities fraud. I had the most phenomenal boss ever. So
did you do Bernie Madoff?
I did work on Bernie Madoff. Yes, I did.
Really?
Yes.
So, Bernie Madoff is, what Bobby Bonilla Day is, right? It was July 1st. We're recording on July 2nd.
Okay. Yeah.
So Bernie Madoff is responsible for Bobby Bonilla Day. Did you know that?
Nope.
So Bobby Bonilla, baseball player, played for the Mets. He was owed $6.5 million. And the Mets upper management said, you know what? We don't want to pay him all this money. He's at the end of his career. We'll defer it, see if he can take a longer buyout. So it was like 2032. They were going to give him $1 million a year. And then they'll take that $6.5 million. And the Mets owner was very good friends with Mr. Bernie Madoff. Invested that $6.5 million with Bernie Madoff. Bobby, postscripts to the story, Bobby Bonilla is still getting paid to this day. He just got paid yesterday. And Bernie Madoff died in prison and took all their money. So Bernie Madoff is directly responsible for Bobby Bonilla Day.
Well, I will say this. It was certainly a time where, how can I say it? I didn't even realize what I was involved in until I get to look back on it and reflect on it. But I was there for those days. And just the impact that I saw on the victims. I was very much a part of the team that interviewed a lot of the victims of Madoff, and
it destroyed lives.
It destroyed lives. People committed suicide as a result of what had happened, and so the stories are endless. But I was in the lipstick building. I had the opportunity to search and go through there with my team, and quite frankly, it was probably one of the biggest cases I had worked on in my career.
Did you ever sit face to face with him?
I did not.
Yeah, I just always wanted to know what his attitude was because he looks like a smug son of a bitch.
I'll tell you, well, I did see him in the courtroom the day that he was walked into the courtroom. And one of the things that I can remember feeling is his absolute cold, stoic look on his face, almost emotionless. And that's what I felt, even sitting there watching him walk in. There was nothing there. It's just absolute empty. And at the time, victims were able to give statements in that courtroom that day, and I'd listened and I was there. And there's a lot of emotion, right, when people are there and talking and saying what he did to them. And I never saw him budge. I never saw anything on his face. No remorse, not anything.
I had a little different take on that Bernie Madoff thing. So the people who invested in him were getting these rates of return that were just crazy, right? Unheard of rates of return. Mm-hmm. So while it sucks that these people got taken advantage of and their life savings got taken out, they were trying to hit the lottery. They were trying to make money on these things. So they have some sort of culpability in this, and something that was unreasonable. But it doesn't excuse what he did at all. But they have some hand in all this stuff. You could have went to your local financial advisor, and you wouldn't have done as well. You went to this guru who was going to get you rich.
I think there was a lot of built up impressions of who he was and what he was capable of. And at some point, people go with that, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we don't know how he's doing it, but he's doing it. And if you're making money, then you're happy.
Yep.
So there's less of a question. But I did talk to some people over the time, and there were little red flags. But at the end of the day, the feeling was almost like, we are so honored to have him take our money, and we are so honored to have the ability to invest, because that was the persona that was given for so many years.
I had a friend of mine, my doctor, the doctor who saved my life, lost some money with him, and he's not an overly wealthy guy, but even him, and he saw this good opportunity and went for it. Yeah. And some like Mets are still paying Bobby Bonilla because they saw an opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, listen, there were so many lives that were hurt by all of that. That at the end of the day.
Was that one of your first cases?
No, thank goodness.
Because I'm like, no, you might as well quit now.
No, actually, it's funny that you asked me that question. One of my very first cases was a $50 million case, and I thought, oh man, this is like the biggest case I'm ever going to have in the FBI. And then I had the opportunity to work on Madoff with the team and the squad at the end of my time in New York, and I'm thinking, 50 million, I thought that was big money. No, this is 50 billion.
Yeah.
So it was not my biggest. That was the biggest financial one at the time with Southern District.
So you're actually doing real investigative detective work.
Yeah.
And it had to be something where you're like, wow. Did you ever stop and just sort of have this, think about everything that's going on? I'm like, wow, I'm actually doing it.
Yes. Pretty much every day, sometimes I had to pinch myself. Even the arrests, like, I can't believe I'm here. Like, how did this happen? Or when we were doing even surveillance, there were moments I thought, I'm getting paid for this? I mean, this is unbelievable. And back in the day, we were sitting in cars and using cameras. And there was just a lot of days where I could not believe what I was a part of. And that's exactly what I was looking for, right? Something that was bigger than I was. A lot bigger. When
you have these successes, though, I know people in the FBI get drawn to other areas. Mm-hmm. I've seen that. One of my friends, Kenneth Strange, who was an FBI agent, he just got drawn out to go here and do contracting work over here and things like that. Did that ever happen to you?
To leave the FBI?
You're a very valuable asset. There's people who want you. You're a strong-willed female with a great head on her shoulders. You would fit into a lot of businesses where you can be much more financially successful than the FBI.
There was always, for me, from my perspective, I wasn't looking anywhere. And no, I didn't want to go in those directions.
Did somebody throw out the feelers, though?
At times over the years, there were little feelers that were out there, but I had a career ahead of me that I was happy with, so I wasn't going anywhere. I liked changing within my 23 years. I left white collar. I ended up going down and doing counterterrorism, and that completely took me out of my comfort zone.
Worse than a podcast?
Actually, this has been really great so far.
Did I do my job?
You did your job.
Thank you.
5 minutes. 5 minutes. So I will say this. I didn't think about leaving the FBI. I just did not. In fact, I was grateful for it. And I, to this day, am very grateful for all of the opportunities and the directions, the good and the bad, and even the ugly. I mean, there's a little bit of everything that goes on, but no job and no career is perfect. And there are going to be very hard days. And like Keith knows, I mean, I've had some of those. But yeah, I changed up within the career. I went to counterterrorism. I had some time doing that. I was in the field. I was out of the field. I was in headquarters. I did counterintelligence for quite some time. And I still think about it. I'm like, wow, I cannot believe I had that career.
Now, at some point throughout your career, you decide to, I don't know why, get married.
He still doesn't know why I said yes.
And you're doing all these amazing things, and then you got this other person coming in there and sort of, derailing is not the right word. It's sort of distracting you from this mission that you're on, this path that you're on. How did that, is there like an FBI dating app?
No, in fact, it was, so his motto to this day is persistence overcame resistance. So he was, listen, he was trained in UMint, and I was his first official bump, as he would say, and his most successful bump. And I don't know if people know what that means.
Is he a cocaine addict?
No. It's all about sources and source development, that when you go up to someone, sort of giving the impression that you're there for another reason than you really are. And the reason he walked by my squad one day was to say hi. And it was kind of from there.
Yeah, listen, guys are real good at that. They'll see something and they'll work an angle.
Yeah,
they'll work an angle.
He did. He worked the angle of, hey, did you know there was an indoor range in Manhattan? And I said, no, I didn't know that. He said, oh yeah, my buddy and I on my squad go all the time. If you're
He's an FBI
interested.
agent as well?
He was an FBI agent. He's also retired.
Man, they're just no different than any other law enforcement in the world. They're just no different.
They just don't have dispatchers.
They all date from within. But so that's a good question. Okay, that's a really, really good question, because in the police world, this is not going to sound very favorable. I told you I'm trying to offend you. I call it, if a female enters into a police department, okay, because it is a male-dominated industry. Okay, I'm just talking facts. She doesn't even have to be that good looking, and she'll get 50 hot dogs thrown at her. Okay?
Yes.
I call it like a police headquarters 10 is like a bar 4. Mm-hmm. All right?
Okay.
Is it like that in the FBI? Because that's something women have to overcome. That I believe is being denied. They're like, no, women are equal. Women. No. They have it worse. They have it worse, because if you're a nice person and you're attractive and you take care of yourself, you're going to get it coming at you from all angles. And it's hard to do your job, because if you have low self-esteem, you're going to eat that up, right? Does that happen in the FBI?
I think it happens anywhere where you have females in a male-dominated environment. I don't think it's the FBI specific. I think it's in any dominant male environment where you have females that are few. I think that that's possible. And it's funny because I went to a women in leadership sabbatical, and it was women from all across, not academia, private sector, law enforcement backgrounds and everything. And we would talk about those type of topics, and sure enough, it was across the board. So it's not even just in law enforcement. I would say I had probably the best boss at the time when I was up in New York, and he made it very clear to all the detectives and the task force officers. He goes, I know I have a few new female agents that are assigned to my squad. You better stay away. And he gave them the heads up, and it was like, stay away from my ladies here, move on.
Yeah, but that changes your behavior, though, right? Yeah. It changes. Well, I'll put it to you this way. So now all of a sudden, instead of, like, if you go to work, you don't have to be conscious of how you dress, Keith, right? You don't have to be conscious of how you dress or whether you put on too much eye makeup, because I know you wear it. And,
Judge me.
But with females, if you're getting that constant, if somebody's hitting on you constantly, then all of a sudden, subconsciously, you get it in your head, like, okay, well, I have to maintain this professionalism, this stoic attitude, because it's got to be a pain.
So I would say this: I found a majority of the time, almost a pretty much high majority, it was professional around me, and I don't know if it was a matter of how I conducted myself. I think that's part of it. I didn't find anything that I couldn't handle. Let's put it that way. When it comes to like how I'm dressing, I mean, we were in suits with white collar all the time. I've always been a professional. One of the things that you said is, and I've always said, I had a lot of nevers back then. I'm never going to leave New York. I'm never going to go into management. I'm never going to do this. And I'm certainly never going to date an FBI agent because that's where I work. And I was absolutely 100% not going to do it. And then I did. And he was the best at not being that way. My husband, and we're going to be married 20 years, 2 beautiful children later, right? He did the opposite. He goes, you know what? How about I say, if you want to go get something to eat, you just tell me no if you don't want to. Oh, it's that easy. So it was very.
That's a great move, man. My hat's off to your husband.
I'm telling you, he was unbelievable. I mean, he still is unbelievable.
He did the anti-hit.
He did the anti-hit. He made it easy. It was, hey, listen, I actually told him on our very first, so the night that we went with a bunch of people to go to that shooting range I told you about, he goes, oh, yeah, if you want to come. It was like 5 of us. Somehow, everybody seemed to go somewhere else. And then it was just him and I. Oh, coincidental. And then he's like,
Smooth operator right there.
Smooth operator. And then he's like, oh, but Jen, you're wearing a suit because you're in white collar. I'll clean your gun. And I'm like, oh, actually, yeah. Can you do that?
Using it to your advantage.
I did. I used that to the advantage. And then it was, hey, let's go grab a bite to eat.
What's your husband's name?
Rob.
Rob, you're a master, dude. I'm very appreciative, and I'm learning a lot here.
He was wonderful. And it was funny. We went out. We talked for 6 hours at the dinner table in Little Italy. We went and had some. And
Where?
I forget the name of the place, but it was Little Italy. And this wonderful old man was like, oh, come to my restaurant. And it's like Italian guy. And we walked in, sat in a corner, and just talked. When the bill came, I said, this is not a date. I don't want anything like, so I'll pay mine, you pay yours. And he's like, listen, I don't have any cash on me. He goes, if you just let me use the card. He goes, I'll use the card, and you can get me another time. I'm like, okay. Well, anyway, the date of that receipt was November 5th, 2002. We got married 3 years later on that day, November 5th, 2005. So it was a joke because that's the night I told him I would never date him. I'm like, this is not a date. I don't want this to even look like a date.
At some point, you go into management.
I know exactly the point I went into management. So management started in 2009, and that was when it was time for headquarters. So my husband actually wanted to go to headquarters first. He took the test. He's like, hey, let's go to headquarters. And I'm like, oh, why would we do that? He goes, let's give it a shot. So he actually got a job down there first. And then I came 3 months later after I got my job. It was counterterrorism that I came down to. And that was my first introduction to being a supervisor. And I had a phenomenal boss in counterterrorism at the time who was a unit chief. And he took me under his wing, really. And I was there for about 2.5 years learning how to be a really good supervisor and learning from the best.
What's different from being an agent to being a supervisor? What is the big difference?
So now you have people responsible that you're responsible for. Now
you give out the orders? You
basically give out the orders. Yeah, you're the one prioritizing. You're the one setting up what's going to go on next. You're setting the goals. You're leading the team, right? So it's not just about only you and only your paperwork. It's now other people coming to you that you're now having to care for, both on a professional level, personal level. And so that began that supervisory experience. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't know if I was going to like it or not until I was there. And then when I was there, I liked it. I liked what I was able to do for people.
That's the J. Edgar Hoover building, right?
No, I actually was at another location at the time.
Secret squirrel stuff.
It was a secret location.
Yeah.
But
Camp,
it was
Camp David, probably.
But it was one of those things where you like being a supervisor when their successes are something that you're extremely happy about. Hey, Jen, I was able to get this accomplished. And I'd be like, yes, that felt good.
That's rare. There are a lot. I'm going to say a majority of supervisors that should never be supervisors because all they want is to look good, but never look better than them. That's when people don't realize that if you have people underneath you that are working and succeeding, by default, you're going to be a superhero. You have to give all that credit back to them.
I gave all the credit to them. At the end of the day, I found like a bit of a niche. I could tell you, I enjoyed when people came to me and shared with me what was going on in their life. That did not bother me. That was actually me feeling that they trusted me. And at the end of the day, I felt that that was the mark of somebody that I would want as a supervisor. And I had some of the best in my first few years at the FBI. I mean, my first boss, Pat Carroll, absolutely amazing. He even came to my retirement. It's 23 years later, and he came to my retirement in December. And then I have Steve Dorito, who's my first supervisor when I became.
That's a tough name to grow up
I
with.
know. Well, you know how I knew I had a great boss in Steve Dorito?
He liked potato chips.
I know. I said to him, I walked by his office one day and I said, "Hey, Steve," I said, sir, actually, I said, sir, how would you exactly like me to refer to you? Like, what should I say in terms of your name? And he goes, "Just call me Cool Ranch." And I was like, so those moments are the moments that you knew. I had two previous supervisors between Pat and Steve who really showed me the ropes of what leadership looked like and what they did for us along the way, and then to give that back, right? So now I'm doing that for the people that were working for me.
How high did you go?
So I ended up getting to the senior executive service ranks of the FBI, which is no longer on a GS scale. So you go year after year up to GS 13, and then you perhaps can get up into the senior executive service ranks. I don't know the exact number, but I know that there are approximately, I don't even know how many of them are, like less than 320 something in the entire FBI. And then females in that role, maybe 75. And then how many were moms and wives? Probably a lot less. Like, I don't have the numbers, but a lot less. So it's not even just how high, it's the fact that I did under those demographics of being married with two children that I was raising along the way. I think that's what I'm.
You overcame all these blockades, right? You overcame that blockade saying that I failed the test. I didn't even pass the test to passing the test. I'm never getting a second interview to getting a second interview. To go into Quantico, all this stuff. You become a supervisor and you be like, I'm a senior executive, but I have too many of these things that are against me, these black marks, but that aren't black marks, but these black marks against me. I am one of few. And then when you become unique in any situation, the pressure's on.
I would say my time management skills are precision. I have precision in what I was able to do, just time management wise. And we talk about sort of balancing the children in my life, my husband. I can tell you I had white knuckles driving to try to get my kids by a certain time. Meanwhile, I knew that perhaps some of my counterparts were able to stay there until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. Initially, my husband and I did not have any family in the Virginia area. So for me, having my in-laws eventually move down gave us a little bit of a cushion, but it was not easy to manage that time. But I did because I had to. I had to.
No plan B is the sure recipe for success.
I had to. There was no option for me, and quite frankly, the demands were high, and especially when you're in the senior ranks, there's no telling someone, I can eventually get there. No, you're going to be there. And again, I had an FBI agent husband who knew those demands, and so there was a lot of communication between the two of us, and a lot of talking out, how to balance. In fact, he did not rise in the ranks as high as
you were his boss?
I was never his boss.
But you were a superior.
I went higher. I did rise.
That's a boss move right there.
Well, I always tell him I have seniority in the FBI because I was a class ahead of him.
So when did you meet this guy right here?
April of 2015. And that is exactly when I started as the domestic terrorism supervisor on CT4, which was the domestic terrorism squad at Washington Field Office on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And Keith Shibley was one of, I believe I had 16. I had 8 task force officers, Keith being one of them, and I had 8 agents. And one of the very first things I did as their boss is get them in a circle. And I said, I want to know about you. So you're going to tell me who you are, what's your background, how long you've been on the squad, and then a fun fact.
The fun facts.
Yeah, I was a fun fact person. I wanted to know. But it was my way of getting to know them from almost immediately. I think that was almost immediate.
So I want to know something. When he told you all those facts, did he look down?
He did look down.
Yeah, so the first time I ever met Keith doesn't realize this. I read body language, right? I do. I read body language on everybody. First thing I noticed about you is when you get to something that's discomfort, that's uncomfortable to you, you'll look down. You'll look down. I don't see that as much in you lately. All right, so that's something that I guess you overcame.
I didn't know I did that.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, but I guess it's just getting more comfortable talking about yourself. I've never been comfortable talking about myself, but after coming here, a year ago, and doing some other stuff, it's still uncomfortable, but it's not like it was back then.
It's practice.
Yeah.
It's all practice. So what did you think of him the first time you met him?
Oh, here we go.
He could stand to grow a couple inches.
Well, we saw eye to eye is what we joke about. Literally. I mean, listen, from the onset, Keith was the angry, harsh, grumpy. I mean, he cursed a lot. I mean, being from New York, that didn't offend me, right? But one thing that I had learned about him from others, and then eventually getting to know him over the time, is really dedicated, very hardworking, well-respected among the task force officers and the entire JTTF, had been with the FBI for quite some time, had his heart in it, loved his family. I mean, number one, loved his family, talked about his kids all the time. And so I had a good impression of him, even with his little angry elf midget, whatever he was talking about at the time. They called him names. No.
I just wish you wouldn't have said that to me, because now I have that in my head and I don't forget things.
Oh, it's man, somebody went down to the FBI gift shop, right? And they got an FBI onesie. And then they superimposed a head that would fit the onesie on there, and I had little arms, and that I think it's actually still up in
it was still up
in the squad area somewhere.
But he could take the joke, and he can dish it out, and he can take it.
Why do you think he's one of my better friends? Because I know he can. I know I can be open and candid with him and be myself, because that's how I like to relate to people. I like to have that light. It's heavy when it's time to get heavy. It's time, but most of the time it's breaking chops, and that's how if I don't like you, I'm not going to break your chops. It's just the way that it is. But you were coming in to this task force. You had your alcohol issues going on at the time, correct?
When Jen got there, they were rampant up. That was 2000 into 2014, beginning of 2015 when she came, was right when I started getting the spinal treatments and being prescribed opiates. So that was they pretty much happened at the same time. So as soon as she got there was the very beginning stage of that long, dark road.
So, Jen, he's in the beginnings of having some problems. Did any of this ever rear its head to you? Unfortunately, we had to break this episode up into 2 parts. There's just too much information to get out in one episode. But you got to stay tuned. Next week's coming up part 2, and we're going to find out why Jen was Keith's guardian angel and how she protected him in his most vulnerable time. So part 2 is coming up next week. Don't forget to tune in.